Section 3.8. In this section, we will simplify rational expressions. A fraction in which the numerator and denominator are polynomials is called a rational expression. Examples of rational expressions are shown below. 5 over z, x squared plus 1 divided by 2x minus 1, y squared minus 3 divided by 3xy plus 1. Care must be exercised when working with rational expressions to ensure that the resulting denominator is not 0 when the variables are replaced with numbers. Recall that division by 0 is undefined. In other words, that you're not allowed to have a 0 on the denominator. A fraction is in simplest form when the numerator and denominator have no common factors other than 1. To simplify fractions, we remove common factors of the numerator and denominator. We will use the same idea to simplify rational expressions. We'll remove common factors of the numerator and denominator. Note, rational expressions must be in their factored form in order to simplify them. We cannot just start canceling terms. We must factor them first. All right, so let's go ahead and start simplifying some rational expressions. So once again, we can't just start canceling terms. We're going to have to factor the numerator and the denominator first. So let's go ahead and look at the 9 minus x squared. Whoops. Get my felt tip pen working. Sorry about that. All right, so we have 9 minus x squared, and recall that's a difference of squares. So when we factor that, that factors, we have a 3 and a 3, an x and an x, plus minus. Okay? So that factors to 3 plus x times 3 minus x. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and factor my x squared plus x minus 12. X times x is x12. I'm considering my factors of 12 that will add up to 1x. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times x is 4x. I'm checking my inner and outer. 3 times x is 3x. My signs have to be different. In order for it to add up to positive 1x, my 4 will be positive, my 1 will be negative. So a positive 4, negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to put my x minus 3 right here. It doesn't matter. X minus 3 and my x plus 4. Okay, now notice up here I have factor 3 minus x. Okay, now that's not exactly the same as x minus 3 because 3 is positive here and this x is negative. So in order to remove these common factors here, I'm going to have to factor a negative 1 out of one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor a negative 1 out of here. Factor a negative 1, negative 1, and I'll just put that negative 1 in front here that I factored out. Okay, so now having done that, that negative that I factored is just going to make the fraction negative out front. Okay, I will have a 3 plus x multiplied by 3 minus x over x plus 4 multiplied by negative x, and now negative 3 divided by negative 1 is positive 3. So now, I mean, I really don't need to rewrite this again, but just so you can see it, I have 3 plus x times 3 minus x, and that's negative, over x plus 4 times 3 minus x. So now you can see 3 minus x divided by 3 minus x is 1. Okay? So we're left with negative 3 plus x, we don't really need our parentheses anymore, over x plus 4. Now if you wanted to write that negative x plus 3 over x plus 4, that's fine. That minus, I just stick right out front and center, okay? It's not with the top. Don't put it with the top or the bottom, just stick it right out front and center. If you're going to stick it with the top or the bottom, you need to put parentheses around the numerator and denominator, okay? You got to be a little bit careful there. Let's try another one. Got to be careful with these negatives. Okay. Now notice this is a little bit different a here because 16x squared y is a monomial and 24xy cubed is a monomial. So what you want to look for is look at the numerator and denominator and just ask yourself, what would the greatest common factor of those two terms be? Well, the GCF of 16 and 24 is 8, correct? The GCF of x squared and x is x. So this is what I'm going to pull out. Then the GCF of y and y cubed is y. So that's what I'm going to factor out of each of those. So if I factor an 8xy out of 16x squared y, well, 8 times 2 is 16. X times x is x squared. You still have a y left in there. 8 times 3 is 24. You factored out the x. Y times y squared. Oh, you don't have a y left. I'm sorry, I made a mistake here. Get my eraser. You factored out your y here. You don't have a y left up there. Oh, I still got my eraser going. Let me get my felt tip pen going again. Ink color black. All right. So now looking at my denominator, I factored an 8xy out. So 8 times 3 is 24. I factored my x. Y times y squared is y cubed. Okay, so 8xy divided by 8xy is 1. Okay, so I can remove that common factor, and I am left remaining 2x over 3y squared. So I've reduced the fraction. I've simplified it. Okay? Now look at the next one. I have 3n minus 4 divided by 4 minus 3n. Now once again, all I need to do here is factor out a negative 1. If I divide this by negative 1 and this by negative 1, so I've just factored out a negative 1, right? So 3n minus 4 on the top. I factored a negative out. I'm just going to put it front and center right there. Okay? 4 divided by negative 1 is negative 4. Negative 3n divided by negative 1 is positive 3n. So you can see I have a negative 3n minus 4 over negative 4 plus 3n. But 3n minus 4 is exactly the same thing as negative 4 plus 3n. You can rewrite it just like that. Don't forget it's negative. 3n minus 4 divided by 3n minus 4 is just equal to 1. So this is equal to negative 1. I hope I'm explaining this well enough to you. Let's try another one. All right, we have 25 minus n squared divided by n squared plus n minus 30. And I think on this one also it might be a little tricky. We may also need to factor out a negative. Okay, so 25 minus n squared is going to factor to, I'm trying to decide where I want to put this. It's going to factor to 5 minus n times 5 plus n. And then down below that, n times n is n squared. And then I need to pick factors of 30 that will add up to 1n. So that's going to be a positive 6 and a negative 5. Let me just erase that for a second. I want to So we have n, okay? I have a 5 and a 6. My 6 is going to be positive, and my n is going to be negative. Okay, now look up above here. You can see you're trying to find factors, factor on the numerator and a denominator that you can remove because you're trying to simplify this. Notice if you look directly above, this 5 is positive, the n is negative. Right below here, the n on the denominator, the n is positive, the 5 is negative. So this is where you can factor out a negative right here. Divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. I'll just stick that negative right there. Okay? So once I do that, I'll have 5 minus n multiplied by 5 plus n over negative, and now my n has become negative. Negative 5 divided by negative n is positive 5 times n plus 6. And so this will equal, I'm going to put my negative out front now, negative. These two things are exactly the same now, so they're going to go away. And just put that negative directly out front, and I have a 5 plus n left on top. Which, if you want to write it as n plus 5, you can. And you have an n plus 6 left on the bottom. Now the 14 and D, the 14 21st, I'm just going to reduce that, simplify that fraction. 7 goes into 14 twice. 7 goes into 21 3 times. You can see you have 3 x's on top and 1 on the bottom. This one's going to go away, and you're going to be left with x squared on top. Okay? Now, you can see you're going to have to take a negative out of here. Divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. Okay? So I'm just going to make that a negative 2/3. So you'll have a 7 minus 3x. 3x divided by negative 1, that'll become a negative 3x. Negative 7 divided by negative 1 will make that a positive 7. Okay? Well, 7 minus 3x is the same as negative 3x plus 7. So it's divided by itself equals 1. So this is just going to be equal to negative 2/3. How are we doing with these? I hope these factoring outs of the negatives aren't confusing you. All right, what do the next ones look like? All right, so we have a trinomial divided by a trinomial. Let's go ahead and factor those out. The numerator, x times x is x squared. We're looking for factors of 6 that will add up to 5x. So 3 times 2, I believe. Both positive. On my denominator, x times x, factors of 15, 3 and 5. Both positive. X plus 3 divided by x plus 3 is 1. So you're left with x plus 2 divided by x plus 5. Now on this last problem, when I worked it, I found that I had made a mistake when I created the book. I believe that this right here on the denominator, this first term, was supposed to be cubed. Okay? So I apologize for that. Now if you look at the numerator, you're going to have to factor out a GCF first. So factor out, it looks like our GCF would be a 2x. So factor out a 2x. And if you see, hopefully I won't run out of room. If I factor out a 2x, I will be left with an x squared plus x minus 2. Okay? And then if I take it a step farther and I factor the trinomial x squared plus x minus 2, I will get, okay, so I have a 2x. And then if I factor that trinomial, I have x. Factors of 2 are 2 and 1. It needs to add up to 1x, so I'll get a positive 2 and a negative 1. Okay? And now on the bottom, I need to factor the x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x. I can factor an x out of there. And if I factor an x out, I'll have x squared plus 2x minus 3. Okay? So I have an x. Now I'll factor my trinomial, xx. Factors of 3 are 3 and 1. It needs to add up to positive 2x, so that will be a positive 3 and a negative 1. Now notice x minus 1 divided by x minus 1, those common factors can be removed, and that common factor x on the numerator and denominator can be removed. So you're going to be left with 2 times x plus 2 over x plus 3. Okay? All right, let's do one more together. Let's factor the numerator. Factors as 6. We can choose from 1 and 6 or 3 and 2. I'm going to start with 3x and 2x, trial and error to see if that works. My factors of 2 are 2 and 1. I'll put the 2 here and the 1 here. I wouldn't be able to put the 2 with the 2. Checking my inner and outer, 2 times 2x is 4x. 3x times 1 is 3x. It needs to add up to negative 7x. So that would make both of my signs negative. Now I will factor my denominator. Okay, factors of 6 again, 3x and 2x. My L is also factors of 6, so I'm going to put my 2 here and my 3 here. I'll check my inner and my outer. 2 times 2x is 4x. 3x times 3 is 9x. Needs to add up to 5x. So this will be positive and this will be negative. So a negative here and a positive here. And so here's the common factor that can be removed. And so simplified, I will have 2x minus 1 over 2x plus 3. All right, so that concludes lesson 3.8.